You ready to start here, Adam?
I think so. Hey, Alex.
Hey, Adam.
Hey, Alex. Are you able to hear everybody easily
You mean that?
on the board?
I can hear some people talking now.
Let me do some testing. Can you hear us now, Alex?
Yep. Yeah, I got you.
Okay, the reason I ask is because Carrie, our recording secretary, is out of town. Would you be so kind as just to jot down a few notes?
Sure.
Thank you. She'll be able to watch the video, but just in case.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, first let me get this screen shared.
Okay, so Adam, we're okay to start?
Mhm.
Okay, well, we will go ahead and call the Fortville Board or Zoning Appeals meeting to order. And we will start this evening's session with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Justice, if you want to get this started. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Adam, would you mind doing roll call for us this evening?
Sure. Mr. Justice, well, Mr. Jacobs, not here. Ms. Willard,
Present?
Ms. Stanfield,
Here.
Mr. Bolander.
Very good, thank you so much. We are now going to go into the swearing in of our new member. We do that in a couple different ways, Adam. Typically, there's either a true swearing in at this ceremony. Is that what you'd like to do?
Yes, we do have a oath of office form here.
Oh, very good.
So what I will do is, Dan, if you'll raise your right hand and just say, I do after this. I, Dan Justice, an appointee of the Town Council President, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully perform the duties of my appointed office and will support and honor to the best of my ability all applicable laws of the state of Indiana, the town of Fortville, as well as the governing rules, policies, and procedures of the board. I hereby affirm that I will perform the duties of this public trust in a fair, equitable, and ethical manner according to the law and to the best of my ability, so help me God.
I did.
Hey, Adam and Lacey,
Yes.
I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Go right ahead, Alex.
So legally, the clerk treasurer is supposed to swear in new members, or if we have, Adam, if you are a notary, then that will work. But we need Missy or a notary.
We have a notary.
Or
Alex, would the notary have to actually complete the reading of the oath?
yes, that they would administer it.
Let's do this a little more officially. Come on up.
One more time.
Come on up. Yeah. So for the minutes, if you wouldn't mind stating your, come on over here, name and how long have you had your notary or whatever designations you typically have? Long time? I don't know. Okay, go ahead. Say your name.
Tanya Davis, 402 East Mill Street. I've been a notary for 30 years probably.
Okay.
Okay. Raise your right hand again. I, Dan Justice, an appointee of the Town Council President, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully perform the duties of my appointed office and will support and honor to the best of my ability all applicable laws of the state of Indiana and the town of Fortville, as well as the governing rules, policies, and procedures of the board. I hereby affirm that I will perform the duties of this public trust in a fair, equitable, and ethical manner according to the law and to the best of my ability. So help me God.
Excellent. There's probably some signatures that have to happen somewhere around now. You pen.
Yeah, I need to go.
There you go.
Dan have to sign this. I think it'll be my notary seal.
Okay, so while we do the notary seal, Alex, anything else on the official swearing in?
I think you need to sign it.
You're all set. Thanks, Lacey.
Thank you so much,
No, I
Alex.
think as long as you, we.
Thank you. Very ceremonial.
Now we know for next time.
That is the value of our back row. I'm gonna tell you that. That's the value of the back row. Okay, all the time. All right, we'll let this ceremonial signature occur.
Thank you.
All right, excellent. We will head now to our third agenda item, which is the selection of a chairperson for the BZA. I believe we can. Well, we haven't met in since last year. Believe it or not, we have not met since October of 2020. And so on an annual basis, our bylaws require that we have a re-election of the chair and vice chair roles for the BZA.
I'll make a motion that we keep in place Lacey Willard as chairperson.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Any selection, we'll go to answer the fourth agenda item, selection of vice chairperson.
I'll nominate Amanda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Very good. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Okay, we are now going to go to the approval of the 2020 October 29th meeting minutes. So those should be in front of you, sent likely a long time ago. So take another peek at those and let's look at any questions that might come up for that. If there are no questions, we can entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes of October 29, 2020 as written.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Typically, if you were not present or a board member, you can abstain from voting of those minutes, and the motion will still carry. So let's go ahead and call a vote. All those who approve, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? There you go. Thank you. All right, excellent. We are now going to head on to our sixth agenda item, although Adam, I should ask if there are any changes to our agendas before we get to official business. Okay, so let's head on to case number 01 SC 2021, VAR 2021, 801 North Center Street. Carry on, Adam.
I'll stand over here so it's a little easier to see the screen. All right, this particular case involves, there are two cases. There's a special exception and 3 variances for the Fortville Village Apartments. So it's located at, the property is at approximately 801 North Center Street. And the zoning on the property is R-4. That's a grandfathered zoning district that we honor today. It's actually carried over from Hancock County zoning. So quick side note, really anything that relates to setback standards, dimensional standards, uses, those core development standards from that zoning ordinance would apply in this case. So Brian Posen of the Inglewood Group is an apartment developer, property manager, and represents the property owner, Michael Surratt. The owner would like to construct an 8-unit apartment building. So they're required to obtain a special exception based on the requirements of the R-4 zoning district from the 2002 Hancock County zoning ordinance. And again, they're seeking 3 development standards variances. A special exception and the variances were granted by the Hancock County BZA in May of 2019, but the approval has expired. And the request is the same today. And I already mentioned about the dimensional standards, setbacks, minimum dwelling unit size, things of that nature. Here's a general map of where the project is. It's kind of on the north side of town. It's off of Vera Court and Center Street. If we zoom into the zoning map, you can see that parcel outlined in red is the subject property. The area in green to the right of it is that R-4 zoning. And then to the north, really all of that kind of beige color that you see is all R3.5 zoning. And then to the west, the orange is multifamily. So this bird's eye image shows the location of the undeveloped property. The remainder of the complex, this is really the last parcel available in the complex. Most of the buildings, I believe, were developed in the 90s or early 2000s. Over to the north is the Timber Ridge subdivision. So we've got single family houses there. To the west, there's I believe I think it's a single family home, or there might be a couple of apartments in there, to be honest, I'm not sure. And then again, to the south is the remainder of the apartment complex. This is a picture. This was taken back in 2019, but it essentially looks the same. So you can see what the existing building looks like to the east. And then here's a site plan, and we'll, once we get to the variance component, we'll dive into each of the issues, but you can see the general layout of the building. I think the only thing that really, there's one thing that changed from the original submittal is it looks like the interior layout changed a bit, but of course it has no bearing on what we do here. But other than that, the site plan is identical to what they had years ago. So you can see, we'll get into the setbacks in a moment. They also want to extend the parking area to accommodate parking for those new units. So again, there's 8 units in this building. And in terms of what the building would look like, it would very much resemble that existing structure that's to the east. A mix of vinyl and brick. So typical considerations in granting special exceptions is parking. And there is ample parking planned on site. Noise will not generate noise. And the impact to neighbors, we haven't received any negative feedback from neighbors, and it is next to an 88-unit apartment complex. In terms of the decision criteria on this, it's based on state law to guide your decision. So we'll run through this quickly. This is also reflected on your ballots. And I'll also give you a staff opinion. So number 1 is the special exception listed in the zoning ordinance. Yes, that 2002 zoning ordinance from the county. Number 2, the special exception, can it be served with adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and other facilities? Yes. Third one is the special exception does not involve any element or cause any condition that may be dangerous, injurious, or noxious to any other property or person and shall comply with the development standards of the zoning ordinance. I say yes. There are some variances that are needed. We'll get into that momentarily. I'd say yes to the special exception is sorted, oriented, and landscaped to produce a harmonious relationship of buildings and grounds to adjacent buildings and properties. Yes, with a condition on evergreen trees, and we'll get into that momentarily. The special exception produces a total visual impression and environment which is consistent with the environment of the neighborhood. I'd say yes, it's adjacent to an existing apartment complex. The special exception shall organize vehicular access and parking to minimize traffic congestion in the neighborhood. I'd say yes. And then lastly, the special exception shall still preserve the intent of the zoning ordinance. I'd say yes. Okay, so that kind of wraps up the special exception component, and then we'll move into the variances. So there's three different development standards variances that they're seeking. Number one is really a core development standard from that 2002 county zoning ordinance that deals with setbacks. So simply put, the requirement in that ordinance was to have a front yard setback of 50 feet. And the applicant is desiring 30 feet from Center Street. So that's considered to be a front setback. We don't have, staff doesn't have any issues with that request. I'll point it out here. There's that 30-foot setback envelope that we're referring to. So go ahead. Yep, circle in red. So code requires 50. They're looking to bring it down to 30. Okay, the second one is a variance on ground floor area. That county ordinance required a minimum ground floor area per unit shall be 750 feet. And they would like to reduce that to 700 feet. I don't see any particular issue with that request either. And the third one has to do with parking. And this could have been, in theory, varied from the county zoning ordinance at the time, or frankly, the Fortville ordinance. But the requirement, it's still, what they're seeking for parking is still below the requirement of each ordinance. So the county zoning ordinance said that apartment hotels, apartments, or multifamily dwellings, you have to provide 2 spaces for each unit. They're looking to provide 1.25 spaces per unit, and that would equate to 10 spaces. I don't have any particular issue with that request on the basis of, we've spoken with a number of multifamily developers really over the years, and they will all tell you that 2 or 2.5 per dwelling unit in an apartment complex is pretty high. So based on that, I'd be comfortable with 1.25 per unit, with the understanding that there's still additional parking throughout that facility.
Can we ask you a question?
We'll probably wait until after
Well,
this
it's okay.
presentation, we'll follow
Yeah.
up questions. Some good notes.
All right, so much like the special exceptions, there is decision criteria that's outlined in state law. And so this criteria is the general welfare. The first one is that the approval would not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. Again, I don't see any of those 3 requests having an impact on that. The second one is adjacent property, that the use and the value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Again, I don't see a particular issue there with any 3 of those requests. And then lastly, practical difficulty, that the strict application of the terms of this chapter will result in a practical difficulty in the use of the property. So that's, in my opinion, very clear that there is a practical difficulty there out of those 3 issues. Now, one of the things we wanted to talk about is, if you're inclined to approve it, we do recommend approving it with the following conditions. Number 1, that all existing handicap parking and sidewalk ramps shall be upgraded as necessary to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. There are some issues in that existing complex, and that was a good opportunity, since we're really going to be finalizing the project with this last building, to bring that up to current code. Second one, in terms of current code, and this is a very, this is not only in our code, this is pretty common across the country, that all existing dumpster enclosures on the property shall be upgraded as necessary to provide gates for aesthetic reasons. And then lastly, this is really a carryover from when the town council had reviewed and made a recommendation on this variance per previous procedure years ago, is they had asked for 4 6-foot-tall evergreen trees along the north property line, just to provide a little bit of foliage there to the residents and Timber Ridge, so decided to carry that one over. So here's an example of the ADA spaces. You're supposed to have an aisle between it, and then there needs to be a basic ramp. As you can see, and we do have somebody who's parked in that space, so having an aisle is not only beneficial, it's required by law. There's an example of the dumpster enclosure. And that's it.
Let's go
So
ahead
if
and
you
open
have
it for questions to Adam.
Yeah, if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to address those.
So back in the, I'm okay with the setback and like that. What was the reason going from 750 square foot to 700? Just the size of the building?
Yeah, I'll defer to the applicant to answer that. My suspicion would be that it perhaps to just market standards.
I have a question. And maybe you don't know, maybe the applicant was, each of these units, are they 1 or 2 bedroom or 3 bedroom or combination of all?
That I don't recall, but I'll defer to the applicant.
What do we, was it 1.5 that we approved for the recent Madison Village development, Adam? Does that ring clear to you?
I can grab it. Give me a second. I know exactly where the file is. Let's do
I'll
it
let-
real quick.
We'll let you do some questions
All right.
and then we can have the applicant.
Okay.
While Adam's grabbing some paperwork, we'll take care of some administrative. Just state your name and
Sure.
spell it for the record, please.
Brian Posen, Pozen, with the Englewood Group, with the address.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Okay.
Sometimes we do swearing in. I think we're okay this evening, but just truthful and honest. That's what you're right. Good, good, good. All right. When we have a virtual council, we typically do swearing in.
Sure.
Okay, so let's ask you a couple of questions and cue it up. I believe the first question was about the square footage, 750 to 700. Give us a little reasoning on that one.
So to kind of back into Ms. Stanfield's, it is a mix of 4 1s, 4 2s. So 750 is just a little beefy for a 1 bedroom. We'll probably be over 700, but 750 is a pretty aggressive 1 bedroom for the market. Minimum size of a 1 bedroom square foot.
How does that compare to the immediate adjacent on square footage? Are those all minimum 750s on the ones?
No,
What about everything else you're putting in the market?
regarding amenities or,
No, just square footage.
we're looking at about 900 for the 2 bedroom. And like I said, probably about, I think 715 is what we were thinking for the 1 bedroom.
And forgive me, I'm not, is this 1 level or
2 levels.
2 levels.
Mhm.
So the 1 bedrooms upstairs or downstairs, or they mixed?
They're actually stacked on top of each other. So you got 2 1s downstairs, 2 1s upstairs.
Any problems with the recommendation on the trees or any comments or questions on those?
Sure. We have concerns about the first 2 and kind of clarify, Adam, we've actually, the first phase was 1980, one of our boss's first apartment developments he's ever done. So we've been in town for a long time. The second phase was 87. The last one was 95, I think it was. So we've had a long, great relationship with the town. The concern is that it's not a single complex. It was developed in 3 phases, 3 different sets of investors, technically 3 different ownerships, although over the time, at some point in the history of the ownership, my boss was part of the ownership. So, but that has actually changed. The phase 1 and 2 are now outside of his ownership, and phase 3 is now a collaboration with HUD. So the parcel we're talking about tonight is just solely owned by Mike. So the concern of 1 and 2 is just simply asking requirements for property that's not part of the applicant is the concern there. Not to say we're not, so we also manage all of these, not to say we won't do it, just kind of tying that to approval of a separate land piece gives us concern when we're going to investors and giving proof of variances and zoning and having to say, well, we have to do these things. Well, where is this on the property? Well, it's not. You can imagine.
Let's talk through that a bit. Is
Sure.
there shared access between all of, is there a shared access point from main drives?
Yes, shared access and parking. Yep,
Is there shared access of overflow parking?
yes.
Is there, will there be assigned spots for this new development for those 10 spots or whatever you agree to? Will they be signed to that?
Assigned?
Yeah. this-
No.
No, okay.
No.
And will you then have a shared access indemnification agreement for cross parking?
Yes, I believe that's already in place with that parcel, but I mean, there'll be shared access and parking, correct,
So,
like the other
yeah,
phases.
so I mean, from our perspective, might own it, we have shared access indemnification agreement that'll overlap, so you can rely upon that parking. That's why it's kind of. even though you own
Agreed.
it,
On the parking,
Yeah.
but on the
trees.
the trees, zero problem.
Okay.
That's a great suggestion that was made by some, I think the residents of Timber Ridge and the county, zero problem. Just the dumpster enclosures, again, those aren't on the property. I also share with Adam, so I get why that's a requirement of municipalities. I'm on the development side of our company, and that's a common request. Truthfully though, what happens is those gates get in, they look nice for half a minute. Trash truck comes in, opens it, bangs them. We do nicer metal, that gets banged, it's more expensive to replace. It's just an ongoing maintenance cost. And not to mention, it ruins the aesthetic of doing it in the first place when you got the trucks, and I'm sure we've all seen this, they just, I'll say it, are not the most careful of how they're maneuvering in and out and whipping those things open, and you try and, it's just a logistical issue to keep that looking as aesthetically pleasing as is desired. So when we're doing developments, we often ask for a variance, just not because we don't disagree, it's just a logistical and a maintenance nightmare going forward, that, because you fix it and then the next week it's beat up again. So that's a secondary concern of that requirement. I will also share, because I feel like that would be an unfair assessment of our experience versus the town of Fortville. We had a phone call with Best Way Disposal and asked them their opinion on gates. And they shared that the gates is a safety and time concern for their drivers. And if we were having to put them in, they would request to remove them because it affects their deliveries or their removals.
Do you use utilizing existing dumpsters or putting in new for your site plan?
On this one, we will use the existing next to the parking,
So existing that's already there.
right,
That's on the lot or on the other lot?
on the lot.
On the lot.
Mhm.
Okay, all right. So you're really going from the safety maintenance on
And I'm,
to-
well, I'm going maintenance, safety, and timing is the best way response from the disposal company.
And are there any sidewalks on site? Are you going to continue any sidewalks? Just deal on sidewalks.
Sure, can I?
Click around. Go
Click.
ahead.
Oh, geez.
Click. Go ahead on your own peril.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so, yeah, I'll walk. So this is all new sidewalk coming down, going up around. Actually, there was a request for the county to extend to Timber Ridge, which we're willing to do, which you aren't asking us to do this time. And then we're adding here and then tying into the existing sidewalk there.
That would coincide with the county sidewalk plan.
Yep.
So that's, is there anything else from the BZA approval in May that's not included here?
I think those are 4, and you guys are asking 3, so.
All right, what is the loading situation with the complex?
Fine
For
load.
access, there's no other special loading needs, just the
No.
same unit. Okay. And would you be unreasonably burdened in the layout with the 1.5? We'll get back to parking, instead of coming down to the from 2 to 1.25. We match some of
Well,
the tendency.
Yeah, because I'm out of space. So the property line is here, and there's the existing here, so I'm throwing in my accessible and then running down and providing a reasonable return there, so I'm maximizing the parking unless, and I think, Adam, this was brought up at the county of parking along here, and that was frowned on from Adam's standpoint as well as the county.
Would there be a separation sidewalk or just parallel to it?
I would assume we would probably want to do parallel, because I just think another 20 feet into that setback would really kind of be on top of the building and on top of kind of backing out, and I think that would be more of a challenge. I don't have a problem backing out into the existing drive, but on the center street, that's a little bit, seems to be a little bit more of a straight shot without parking buffering it.
Tell me about the facade. Is a vinyl and brick combination?
Yeah, that's not fully determined 100% yet. What we're trying to do is just match the aesthetic of the existing complex. The affordable was the phase 3, which had the vinyl. So there was a little bit of price. This is obviously this is gonna be market rate apartments. So we are just trying to convey that we're not gonna have something completely out of place within the master development. So is that gonna be cement board versus brick or vinyl versus vinyl? It's, I guess, technically still to be determined.
Mostly because our design standards have changed since 1980.
Understood. Yep. So you don't like vinyl?
It's just, yeah, well, it's
Yeah.
when you're talking about long-term maintenance, if
Sure.
you're on the topic of maintenance, that's kind of a concern is the look and feel over the period of time, especially for a commercial type complex for multi-family. That's the concern.
Yeah, I think we can probably not do vinyl and just create some color comparison to the existing building, just to show consistency.
Sure.
But yeah, we would, obviously, once we get into permit,
Okay, do you have any pending approvals from HUD that would, are you guys already approved for your HUD and everything in, all good to go?
Mhm.
Reason, was HUD the reasoning for the delay between the 519 approval from the BZA and the county now, or just market conditions?
market, pandemic.
All right, I have
So now we're gonna start building when lumber prices are through the roof.
smartest.
Yeah, tell you what.
But interest rates are low. so-
Yes.
Yes.
So
Adam?
the existing apartments there, are those parking spaces pretty full all the time or?
So we did it for, when we came up with kind of, not only backed in, but we did a survey and talked to the site manager and felt comfortable that there would be zero concern. Again, I would echo Adam's, that most municipalities do have a higher than expected parking count expectation. So I understand 125 is not 15. We're just maximizing out on that. And then again, there's actually a small maintenance office here. So the residential building is actually over here. So these spaces would very easily, they're not close to entries, so they're not used very often.
All right, any other questions from petition?
How close is the nearest dumpster? So.
Good question.
There's no tenants on it. Very far.
So there's actually one, say right about here.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
We do have, let's go ahead and revisit with the Mr. Paperwork over here. Adam, what'd you get?
Oh, yeah, it was 1.5.
1.5. Very good, thank you. We do have time in our agenda for those who are participating either virtually or in person to remonstrate or speak out with questions, clarifications, or against this project. Okay, let the record reflect that we have none. We do have time in our agenda as well for those who are representatives of the government or government positions to speak out as well. Had you feel this evening already? Okay, very good. Okay, let's head back. Because we do have any other rebuttal, anything else that you would, we just went right into questions. I mean, if you want to paint a different picture or anything on rebuttal, you have an opportunity or any other questions for you. Yeah,
so let me just kind of go back. The accessible parking, the picture, I'm gonna try my hand again. How about that? That's obviously not original and it's goofy. I have a feeling why they did it, because somebody in this building, I don't know if you guys knew, one of your residents, 100-something years old, was one of our residents, and she had been there since the thing opened, and she wouldn't let us change out the carpet. She loved the original carpet from 1980. God bless her. So we have some awesome tenants, and I suspect we have somebody in this building who wanted a parking space by them, who maybe had some mobility issues. So this is a case of a good idea in theory, but poor execution. I actually just checked. So this does have rural development loan still associated with the property with a different owner.
They are required to go through inspections periodically to check the files and to check the property. I don't know how long this has been like that, but that September of 2019 is when the report was, and shockingly, this wasn't noted on the report. So I don't know. This is obvious to me. This is embarrassing for us. But what the challenge is to kind of do this right. We've got to redo the lots. We got to redo the stripe and redo the seal coat for the seniors. And because we got as much parking in as we can. And
So an appropriate maybe fix on that we've seen is that those are not handicap, those are actually dedicated spaces.
exactly. So what we do is black this out, take down the sign and say reserved and work out something like that.
And then you get your handicap accessibility appropriately according to code elsewhere.
Well, we have them elsewhere. I just drove through and kind of looked at that. I don't see any, I don't know if, we haven't talked about more on the site, but we do have accessible spots elsewhere on the site with the ramps, with the side aisles. Again, if that's something that, you know, we need to look at, I'm happy as a long-term partner with the town to go back and look at separately, just have concerns legally about making it a requirement of this approval. So again, but
Again, if you haven't wanted shared parking with overflow there, and shared parking agreement. And if you are, you're actually taking that on, or you can say we're not doing shared parking, and then we're looking at 1.5, right? So it's one or the other. Can't have both.
well, how does,
Sorry, are you providing handicap accessibility parking spaces in the 10-ish that you're doing? Yes. And you're doing it you're using this for overflow.
right, but this is,
I think we're good. Let's get back with that.
okay.
one.
So what I'm saying is, we'll block that out, you know, here in the next whatever, and now that we understand that that's like that.
Well, what I say is a couple comments on that. First, the ADA law has been around since 1990. So we're looking at 31 years. This was something that we brought up in 2019. And I do think it's disingenuous of Mr. Posen and his group to suddenly say, well, we don't own the property, so therefore we're not on the hook for it. Now, what I will say is the town is not technically the enforcement agency for ADA. It's really the Department of Justice. That's done either at the federal level or the state level. And to have a public housing complex and not even address this issue, but then also to kind of punt it and say, well, it's not our problem, I think is really disingenuous. Secondly, in terms of dumpster gates, I flat out disagree with the assessment that dumpster gates will get damaged. It's like anything else. You have to have good quality. If you have a good quality gate, it's not going to get damaged. I've seen ones that get damaged, they're poor quality, and I've seen ones that don't get damaged, they're good quality. So again, I think this is an opportunity to make reasonable upgrades to their entire project. And in terms of the trash company not being receptive to you know, gates, to be honest, that they didn't write the ordinance. It was something that the town approved based on citizen input a long time ago. So, you know, if they have an issue with that, they need to come to the town council and try to get that changed. But shy of that, again, I'm bewildered as to, especially on the ADA issue, that, you know, there's not even a willingness to tackle that when it needs to get done. So, okay, just my 2 cents on
Any other
that.
questions for Adam? I have a follow-up. What about the sidewalk issue and continuation of the sidewalk plan? It's in the BZA. Is that something that you considered or an item?
Yeah, the sidewalk is, they're graciously providing a connection to Timber Ridge, which is probably an
So
extra
it is
50 feet of, I mean, again, cost would be negligible there.
okay, but that is included in plans existing, so we would have to note that otherwise.
No, it's in the plans existing, correct.
Okay. All right. And any concerns about a discussion on the facade, Adam?
Well, you know, I think you raised some good points in terms of vinyl is technically an allowed material in the town. Are you saying, I missed that point, are you saying you're willing to do no vinyl?
it hasn't been finalized yet.
Okay. I mean, honestly, I would say I could go either, my recommendation to all would be go either way. I mean, there's vinyl on the rest of the complex. I think, again, it is good in terms of maintenance. And if this was a standalone building, I'd probably say I'm not a fan of vinyl, but in this project, I'd be okay with it, my opinion.
All right, we have an opportunity now to ask any other questions of anybody else or to discuss. So anybody from the BZA have additional comments or items we'd like to discuss?
I just have one, just a clarification, because I got kind of confused as we went down into the weeds on the dumpster. Are you putting in an additional dumpster location with this new build project, or what's on site will also service the new building?
What's on site?
Okay. No question I have. Just confused.
Okay, barring any other questions or clarifications, typically with a multi-tiered ballot, we would take these one by one in sequence. We would need to consider first the special exception to the R4, and then we would handle to the variances. Does that sound like an acceptable sequence to you, Alex? Sound about right legally?
It does. Sorry, I had to get off mute.
No worries, I didn't give you much time. Okay, so what we would consider first is the special exception for multifamily use, R4. We might want to discuss the totality of, in any type of proposal, the totality of any non-variance related contingencies. It's really important for us to make sure that conditions apply. Note that the conditions that we're going to consider next, should this pass, would be the trees, the dumpster, and the ADA parking. Those are the three things that we'll consider. But we also discussed a facade and a parking agreement. So those are other items that we can discuss either as part of our first ballot for special exception or on the variances. Just a little point of order for us. Would anybody like to make a motion for the BZA's consideration for the special exception use? Special exception.
Before I do, I got a question. So we're talking just on this, the ballot for the special exception. And I think in this was the issue of the evergreen trees. Is that correct? Was that on number 4? Or are we going, or do we want to do that on
The trees, yeah. I'm guessing we would want to couple the trees onto this one if there was a condition.
or do we, I guess my question is, do we know if that's already in the plan, these 4 6-foot evergreen trees on the, okay, if it's not, okay. All right, then, I move to motion to approve. Yes. A motion to approve the ballot for special exceptions. Items 1 through 7 with the note, which one was it, number,
Condition
a condition on number,
with regard to the evergreen trees.
yes, on number 4, that there be 4 6-foot tall evergreen trees on the north property line placed.
Very good. So we have a motion to approve the ballot for special exceptions with condition with regard to the evergreen trees. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
We can open it up for discussion now. The only item that we haven't put into the conditions is, and let's go ahead and discuss now, the facade. What are your thoughts on facade note, if any, onto the conditions? Any discussion on that?
I would say if they try to match the existing.
That's why I started. Didn't you say they was matching existing with brick and vinyl?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I see it.
Match existing or better, either one, you know, if they
Very good.
choose to go down the road. and-
No need for a split condition for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other items of discussion for this motion? Okay. I believe, remind me on this one, do we do both a verbal vote as well as a written vote, or we just read it and hand it to me and I'll let you know if it passes? Alex?
Yes.
Give me a BZA point of.
Verbal vote is fine, and then you'll sign the approval or denial, once your final actions are taken tonight. So verbal vote's fine.
Excellent, thank you, Alex. Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve developer special exception with the conditions with regard to the evergreen trees, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, we'll do our paperwork on that in a moment. Make sure you do note about the evergreen trees and the conditions though. We have then variances with 3 of them. We can first take on the variance number 1 of 3 with regard to setbacks, 30 feet instead of 50 feet. Would anybody like to make a motion with regard to this? Okay. Motion to approve ballot for variances 1 of 3.
Okay, I'm making a motion to approve the ballot for variances of number 1 of 3 for the setbacks to be 30 foot instead of 50 as required.
Well stated. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any additional conditions? Okay, that's been motioned to approve 1 of 3 for setbacks for the ballot for variances. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Okay, let's go ahead and just make a couple of notes on that. And we'll do some signatures here in a moment. We now have variance 2 of 3 with regard to the ground floor area, reducing from 750 to 700 square feet. And you can take a motion on this matter.
I move to approve the variance, number 2 of 3, ground floor area, 700 square feet instead of 750 square feet.
Motion, is there a second? Any discussion or additional conditions we'd like to discuss on this? Let's go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? The motion carries. We have some people up there. And finally, we have variance 3 of 3 with regard to parking. Do we need any discussion before this? What do you want to discuss with the motion?
Well, is this where we're going to talk about the ADA spaces and the dumpster and all of that? Okay.
I think there's another point that that now that it's been disclosed that we are that we're reliant upon a shared parking agreement. Typically, what we would want to do is have on file or have executed a shared parking identification agreement. It's very similar to easement. It's very similar to any shared. If we know that there's 2 parties and they're sharing and agree, we just want to make sure that there's an agreement to do so. So I just want to make sure that we have that noted, maybe perhaps as a condition, and that would just be either on file or as submitted to Adam. That's been really important in other planning commission BZA type of formats for sure. Let's talk about a dumpster. Do you want to talk about it within the motion, or do you want to chat about it before the motion? Very good. This is very good.
Lacey, if I could make a quick comment.
Yes, please.
If I understood the testimony correctly from petitioner and Adam, technically, although there's some sort of relationship, maybe current, certainly sounds like in the past, between the petitioner's entity for the new development and the existing property as far as ownership. If there is a concern about requiring as a condition of approval that petitioner do something on the existing property, whether it's with the ADA parking or the dumpster, I think it would be appropriate to tie that in to the agreement, the shared access and parking agreement that you just referenced, which I completely agree with, that we should have that on file as a condition, but that agreement also contain provisions that would allow petitioner to satisfy any conditions that the BZA deems appropriate for approval. So I think that's the way that we can address that legal issue that petitioner mentioned, and rightfully so there is, but the way to address it is through that agreement.
Completely agree. Everyone. It's kind of a layered approach, but it's why those agreements are so important when you're having multiple use. I mean, it's just inviting conflict. What if someone sells? We are trying to limit the amount of people who are coming before us in the future through those types of agreements. Okay, thank you, Adam, or Alex, sorry. Let's do dumpster. Go ahead.
So in this condition, which would be the agreement, we need to state about, in this agreement, we need to state that the shared parking, address the ADA parking and the dumpster.
Yes, so we need to first consider if we will allow for the reduction from 2.0 to 1.5 parking spaces. We need to then second consider imposing a condition that a shared access agreement is in place that addresses dumpster doors and ADA parking and the remainder of the property. So we first say, is the variance appropriate? And with regard to the parking, because the dumpsters within the parking area is amenity, then that shared access agreement would address both the dumpster doors and the ADA. So I think we probably first need to tackle, let's do this in order then. 1.25. The option for 1.5 would be to do parallel parking along the extended sidewalk. Probably no other option unless we're shrinking the footprint of the building. It's probably the difference there.
Well, my thought is if we go down and you approve the 1.25, that, like was stated, there the parking spots that are already in place for the existing buildings sound like they're a little more aggressive to begin with, and there is some overflow. So again, this is a hard one to, without counting the spots and counting how many, I don't know what's all in the existing.
Or the usage of the existing.
Or the usage, exactly.
So when the county approved this 2 years ago, was the parking spaces part of it, or?
Yes. So they did approve it at a rate of 1.25.
They're never full. Parking spaces are not. I mean, I drive through there a lot, especially in that back end.
And not now. It might be in the
And one other, just
good for occupancy for you.
in making your decision, one other aspect too is I know along Center Street, there actually are some really nice canopy trees over there. I don't know what impact parallel parking would, it may have an impact on that when it can be taken out. I don't know.
I mean, the one thing we need to look at is setting precedent for going from 1.22 to 1.5 and then 1.25. That's just that precedent setting. But this also has the luxury of having adjacent parking with an overflow weekend. And that's a really common framework for phase expansions. So we went, our requirement is 2.5 and
I think it's 2.5.
2.5.
Bill.
There's a R4 2.0 parking, I guess.
In the county.
Yeah, in the
That
county.
ordinance is 2.0.
And we just went down for Madison Village to 1.5, and now we're squeezing it more to 1.25. So it's just, sequence of reductions that that may make sense according to the facts ahead of us. The facts ahead of us now are that there is an adjacent parking agreement in Madison. So that changes the facts a bit, but 1.25 for us.
That's typical for us. Parking changes.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's the most of these kind of order, like, wait, you just prolong the parking issues again. That's kind of in the in our charge as well. Because that's the type of comments thing.
Oh, I say since the previous had already been approved at 1.25, I would say I'll go with 1.25.
Alright. So we're just kind of sculpting a motion right now. Let's
Right.
talk about the dumpster doors. Any discussion on that before we put someone to task of doing the motion?
Adam, has there been any issues with the dumpsters over there? Complaints of trash out or?
Not to my knowledge.
I have a question. So if for an additional 8 units, is this the dumpster that's on the ones that are already on site? Is it going to be adequate to take the load of a whole nother building of 8 units? I mean, is it all of a sudden now we will start having issues with
You're looking
overflow?
at anywhere from 16 to 24 new residents in there now. So it's probably trash.
Forget the doors. I'm just thinking of the capacity of the, and there's just the one dumpster? Oh, there's not. There's multiple ones.
How many is there on the property? No properties, you know?
At least 3.
How's your occupancy right now?
Good. I'd also say the trash pickup would be our concern when we have,
How many days do they pick it up?
I don't know that, that's why I'm saying, but that's my point, like, we could change the scheduling if it becomes too much. That's seemingly something that could be handled. It does us no good to have overflowing dumpsters, gates or not. So I know that, I'm sure they're on their sweet spot right now, and if it gets adjusted, it gets adjusted. We gotta pay for an extra pickup.
And you have to capture additional parking spaces on the dumpster
Right,
as well.
right.
And there will not be 16 people in the building. There just won't. Because with four ones, twos, we might get a couple, 2 people. But that's pretty aggressive.
Any discussion on dumpster doors? Let's try 88 parking. Any discussion on that before we entertain a motion? All right, so let's.
They're gonna add one more 88 parking over in that
To meet the code.
1 or 2.
One, to meet the code.
Well, I do have mixed feelings about that. I mean, now's the time to fix the parking, but like you said, some of this doesn't really fall under us to fix. It's under,
Well, as Alex stated, that could be the site access and site access agreement for shared parking. It can be a requirement that dumpster doors be installed and that 88 parking of existing use be converted. That would be the framework that would be used. It's just the concept of, is that a requirement that is appropriate? Whatever, let's get this discussion going. Let's get a motion. I'm gonna have to make a motion. There's 3 items that we need to put into that. Please, whoever's making the motion, mention variance number 3 of 3, the 1.25, and mention the site access that addresses your recommendation on dumpster doors and 88 parking. Let's get this open. That was apparently really inspiring, by the way.
there's just a lot to pack into this. Okay, I'll attempt this, sir. Okay,
One question.
Yeah.
And you said something about the 88 parking. That's really, whose jurisdiction is that?
It's, my understanding is technically the enforcement agency is the Department of Justice. However, there's obviously some overlap in that It's a common item that's mentioned in zoning ordinances, to make sure that those rules are being followed. So, for instance, I think for the town to be able to issue a fine against that would probably not be within our jurisdiction to do that. But I would argue that it's within our purview to at least review it, and any kind of site plan comes in. And
Hey,
ensure-
Adam, I might be wrong about this, but aren't there references to ADA compliance in the town's fair building and housing ordinance that we update every so often to satisfy federal requirements?
Yes, that's a good point. That is in there.
Well, and if there's HUD money coming in, you're probably gonna get some sort of ADA AG, which is the accessible now.
No.
No, HUD doesn't care about accessibility.
Oh, they do. And that's what I'm saying, like, I guess, I don't know if this is out of order, but like, is your concern just of that picture, or are there other points? Because if you have accessible parking throughout the phases, the one you pointed out is not the only one that's,
Right. It's not the only one.
are there other ones that are not?
Well, I think it would just be any ones that are on the site that don't meet, they all need to meet the law.
No, I agree,
Whether
but
it involves signage, whether it involves striping. So, and also, one last point you had mentioned about redoing the whole parking lot. I mean, I don't believe that to be necessary to fix that problem. It would be as simple as putting in ramps, depressed sidewalk locations and striping. You could always tar out the old lines if you wanted to go that route. It wouldn't
No,
look
I'm
great,
saying
but it's
In your condition though,
doable,
you gotta add a 5-foot wide aisle.
a minimum, right?
Right, so I gotta then restripe all my parking in that row, and I'm gonna lose a spot.
Well, potentially, unless if there are more spaces than are required. We'd have to look at that. You could just X that one out and use that one as an aisle.
You could.
I don't know.
You could,
It's not a complicated problem.
no, that's what I'm saying, I'm like, but that's not, that, we're ignoring the whole, there's a lip there on the sidewalk. That was never an original accessible parking location. We messed up, we put stuff there that shouldn't have never been there, but at the end of that aisle is accessible parking that meets the.
Right, I'm sure some does.
Yeah,
I'm
so I
not saying
just-
that they all don't, but the
So I
ones,
think that the point is that whatever spaces that are not meeting handicap accessibility codes need to be deleted from having the benefit of handicap accessibility. And
No
then
problem.
The remainder of the handicap accessibility spaces that are allotted to the site need to meet code as well. We have minimum standards under the ADA AG for handicap spaces
Sure,
that have to have side aisle access.
Sure.
Just be a matter of doing a reassessment. Those are done all the time. Very
but why
easy.
can't there be a complaint to the particular phase of the violation on the site rather than tying it to a different land application? If I'm understanding,
Because unfortunately, you're relying upon that shared parking for your overflow. We are giving you 1.25 parking spaces because of your overflow and access to, we knowingly are giving you
Yep.
access to non-ADA spaces.
Yep.
We are in a position to say, wait a second, we know the handicap accessibility is not right. We know that the only way for you to truly park it in a manner that what we think meets the needs is to allow you for the overflow. So we know you have to have that overflow, but we know that overflow is not in compliance. So that's the tie that you see the logical tie?
a little bit, I guess, I just would rather. I mean, yeah,
So we either, it's one or the other. It's like.
no, I hear you,
Yeah.
it doesn't, and again, I'm not trying to be disingenuous, and I'm gonna fight Adam later for calling me that, but the fact that we could just black out that particular example and be done with our HUD, with our federal rural development, it's never been brought up, and so I assume, not knowing intimately, that our other spaces are fine. It's just this one,
My recommendation is that we would just leave it very open, is that
Yeah.
the site, the parking under the site access identification will be compliant with ADA rules. It might be that you black out those 2 spots from
Yep.
ADA parking and the rest
Yep.
of them meet it. You just need to meet minimum requirements everywhere else.
Sure.
So Adam, would you be acceptable? That would be
yeah,
acceptable.
I think if you were willing to do a motion, let me just throw this out there for you guys to chew on, is to say that if you were to approve it, say, subject to providing a shared parking agreement, which would be the mechanism to allow ADA upgrades and dumpster gates. if you're inclined.
That's much clearer. We knowingly allow them to go into the shared parking to make sure that's in compliance. Okay. All right,
So can I spin something back to you? What if we, and again, I guess we're just playing here and I don't know.
Don't give us more to work with here. Don't give us more to fix.
Well-
Go ahead, spin it back.
You're gonna either decide to do what you're gonna do or not, but I'm saying like if we're counting on this, I mean, shared access, I can't get around, right? But shared parking, if we provide, I think, 2 more spots on that parcel and meet your 1.5, does that change anything?
You gotta meet actually 2, technically.
2 more.
Well, no, you gotta meet 2. 1.5, 2.0 is your requirement, not 1.5.
I thought you were saying,
We have made an exception.
Made an exception.
To another development.
Well, I think the
1.5.
current standard, the Fortville standard is actually 2.5.
Yeah, it's 2.5.
2.5.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't change it from the 2 because, you know, if you're asking for 1.25, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you were to withdraw that variance,
I don't know, I can't get 20 last night.
then you'd have to.
Yeah,
get
exactly. You
2.5.
need that shared. Yeah, we know that.
And 16,
And we're okay with that.
16 is gonna be
but-
tough too. Okay,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
talking.
The math just doesn't work on that.
Yeah.
I said, don't give us more to have to solve
I'm
up here.
trying.
Come on.
I'm just,
come on.
I'm tripping on this, I mean, but
All
I'm willing
right,
to work with it.
we have had excellent discussion. Let's go ahead and see if anybody would like to try a motion.
All right. I'll take it.
There's that deep breath that I love to hear. All right, let's go.
Okay. All right, I am going to make a motion to accept ballot for variance, the variance number 3 of 3. Parking 1.25 spaces per unit instead of 2.0 is required. With a condition that they obtain a shared agreement that will address and comply with BDA parking and gates on the dumpster.
That was a very clean motion. Thank you. There's been a motion for approval. Wonderfully stated. Is there a second? All right, let's do some discussion. Any questions, clarifications, or changes? All right, let's call for a verbal vote. Is the motion for approval 303, parking 1.25, side access and shared parking with a requirement for 8A parking, upgrades, and dumpster doors. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, that gets us through, and we need to do some paperwork, so let's just pause here for a moment and use these signatures. Don't forget to date. And we're gonna pass down to Adam. Just as a reminder, since we're a little bit rusty on this, as I am, you need some yeses or nos. You need any conditions noted, you need granted or denied, and you need your date and signature. All those fill in the blanks.
So we're doing yeses and nos.
Yep, you gotta give your yeses and nos. Conditions, vote, date and signature. When complete, we're gonna pass it down to Adam and he'll just check it to make sure that our verbal votes match our hand votes, and if any variance, any changes occur, yeah. That's what I think. Let's make sure that's right. It's the 24th. It's a lot to write down. You ready? I'm gonna pass it down to Adam and check our work. We don't have any gaps. Here we go. While we pass them, any other items that this board wish to discuss? I'm gonna let you just check on those for about 30 seconds. Fast as I can. Thank you.
I can't keep up
I
all.
remember, I know.
I
I think
thought,
CGS was purchased.
Oh, that's
yeah, because they changed.
Okay, let's see here.
we gotta keep
Special
going.
exception. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. That looks good. Yes, yes, yes. Setback. Good, thanks.
It is, isn't it?
Handy stuff.
Like I'm
Yeah.
doing a ballots for voting or something.
Oh.
Out of the board of elections. All right. condition of the check.
We're good?
Yep,
All
looks
right,
great
thanks
to
for
me.
checking us out. Any other items you need from us, Adam?
Nope.
All right, let's go ahead and do a motion to adjourn. Anybody wish?
I'll move to adjourn.
Any seconds? Looking your way. All right, very good. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. And here we go. See everybody, maybe next month.
Everybody. Thanks,
You
Alex.
you should be motioned out.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks for hanging with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're engaged through.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome to court.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be excited to watch your development too.
Yeah.
That's interesting stuff.
Yeah, feel free to use our questions. I did find it. Well, I did.
Oh, I
Normally
this
I'm-
meeting, I know.
Set up the motion to adjourn.
Okay, yeah.